Are you a soul butterfly?
Welcome back to the Power of Persuasion, charisma, influence, and presence. In this part, we are going to be exploring, can any of this be coached? And Mikey's going to lead it. He's got some thoughts to share, and then we'll have a little chat about it. Hey, team. Mikey, can this be coached?
The short answer is yes. Yes, it can be. And of course, we know this from our years of coaching, of speaking the speech, as it were, for what is it, 22 or so years now, that there are certain things that people can do that will absolutely up their ability to influence, to persuade people, and will up that sense we get that they have a degree of charisma. Fascinatingly, of course, in a way that they might not have had when we first meet them. So our experience is backed up pretty convincingly by, certainly in my research, the most comprehensive experiment that went into this, done by the University of Lausanne, if I'm saying that correctly, Lausanne, in 2011, where they had various control groups over several months, and they were able to measure the influence, the charisma of individuals who were encouraged to adopt certain speaking and behavioral qualities associated with charismatic, influential people. And there were marked differences over time. And yeah, they discovered that leaders, by the force, if you like, of their personal abilities, they were capable of having pretty profound, extraordinary effects on followers. And they discovered that, and this does, of course, touch in with what you have said before, certainly what Ruth said, that the foundation of certainly charisma is this emotional connection that leaders have with their followers. So, and this will come as no surprise, obviously, to us and to the people we've worked with, but they observed what happened when people, leaders, took up that bit more space, as Boo puts it so beautifully, their awareness of their physical footprint when they spoke to their audiences, by connecting with better eye contact, natural use of gestures to support what they were saying. And of course, perhaps the least surprising quality of all, when they were not rushed when they spoke, when they took that bit more time. Those leaders who adopted were able to practice and get good at letting their messages sit. They were comfortable with occasional moments of silence. And of course, tied closely to that is those speakers who managed to just eradicate ers and ums from their talk. They took on a greater air of authority and conviction when they spoke. They seemed more comfortable in their own skin, which I think is a quality that these charismatic people have. They just seem at ease with the world and with themselves. So there are ways of saying things that these speakers and leaders have, how they say what they say. But of course, another thing they discovered was the huge impact that their content has as well. So people who have persuasive qualities, influence, charisma, they will tend to use, for example, metaphors to simplify their message or to stir emotions. And of course, to aid recall. In other words, things they say tend to stick more. They take hold of our mental and emotional memories. And that struck a chord with me. I'll never forget a few years ago listening to the radio and someone describing the Amazon rainforest as the lungs of the earth. It just burned itself into my memory. So they have huge power, metaphors and similes and these sorts of things. It made me think about a few for our own world of communication, and I thought of how might we describe aspects of great communication, I thought, well, in terms of collaboration, we could describe it as a symphony, that every person's contribution and their timing and listening skills all matter to create this sort of harmony that's necessary for great communication. For clarity and connection, maybe we could think of it as a bridge. So it turns obstacles into connections, allowing ideas and emotions to cross the gap safely. If we think of it in terms of relationships, a heartbeat, this illustrates that consistent, steady exchanges of information are what keep bonds alive. If we think of it in terms of conflict resolution, think of it as a dance. It requires that stepping forward and backward, reacting to your partner's movements rather than just to your own rhythm. And this ties in with some of the qualities you have all mentioned in terms of what great communicators, charismatic, influential communicators do. They make us feel like we've been listened to. So there is that dance element to it. I just thought I'd throw that into the mix. And
Very nice.
some
Very
metaphors
nice.
for what we do. And of course, which we always talk about in the work we do, charismatic leaders, they use stories and anecdotes to make their messages, what they're saying understandable, easy to remember, and of course to connect us on that emotional level. It takes practice, it takes awareness, of course, but with the consistent adoption of these various things in terms of how we say what we say and choosing well what we say, we really, really can become more influential and charismatic. Having said all that, the driving force in terms of who we've been exploring today, Keir, couldn't make that leap, could he? He just could not make that leap. So yes, it's coachable. Does that mean it's coachable to all? Is a really, really fascinating question, because it would appear to me there is no question that the Keir Starmer would have had some coaching, some input, right? And there were moments. I thought his resignation speech was maybe the closest we got to a sense of real emotion, certainly towards the end when he spoke about his wife and family. But for 99.9% of the time, that's what we're missing. And part of it is just this vocal quality he has that he was born with, but he just couldn't make that transition to speaking in a way that really felt connected to the importance of what he was talking about. And I think that contributed massively to his downfall. We just couldn't make that emotional connection to him. So it's coachable, and I'm throwing it out there. It clearly isn't coachable across the board.
Yeah, and maybe there's elements of it that are coachable, right? So you can obviously you can coach better posture, and you can coach better connection and things that you can do with emphasis and stuff like that. But that charisma, that innate thing that Ruth talk about, that God-given thing, if you like, if you want to use that, I guess that's harder, right? But it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because a lot of actors have charisma when they're on stage, but you meet them in real life and they're actually not that charismatic. And so is it a tap that can be turned? Like, do charismatic people wake up and they're instantly charismatic? Are they always charismatic, right? Or do they just ramp it up, So I think there's quite an interesting thing there about authenticity, which I think that was the thing I would always say about Starmer. He was authentic. You might not have liked it, but it was real. And maybe that's what he was going for, is just to be unlike previous prime ministers. I've always thought we often go from one extreme to another with our prime ministers. If you think about it over the last 30 odd years, you'll get a Johnson or you'll get a May followed by a Johnson, followed by let's ignore Truss, but by a Sunak. They're all quite opposites.
I think it's really interesting because it's made me think of the people that we really, going back to the cult leaders things and the prime ministers that we like, and it's that accessibility when people don't talk at you, but when they seemingly talk with you. And going on to Jan's brilliant piece about being so open, but it's when you feel like I'm that person as well. He or she is like me. So that's sort of empowering in itself because you so admire what some of these people have. And it's that accessibility of being so open to so that you can instantly relate to people. And I think that's one of the things that I feel Starmer has lacked. I actually I know I'm in the minority, but I've always quite liked him, except I'm quite often disappointed when I listen to him because it feels like he's not open to me. He's just telling me what's happened rather than discussed with me what's happened.
Yeah. Often when we're working with leaders, we'll do something called benchmarking, where we'll ask an aspiring leader to think of somebody that they respect as a speaker, and we'll ask them to think of them as if they're speaking with no sound. So just to describe the physical qualities, then if they're only listening, to describe the vocal qualities, and then the content, what they say. So you can, by breaking it down like that, you can identify the qualities and then look at those qualities and say, well, do you have those? Do I have those? Or do I need to ramp those bits up? How do I ramp those up? So you can break all of that down, can't you? Do we think, and this is one for Jan, do we think this is an introvert extrovert thing? Sorry, Jan.
No.
You have to explain to everybody why I think you are the perfect example of this.
So what you're saying is, can people who prefer introversion be charismatic, wonderful? Yes, they can, John.
Okay.
Yes, they can. Oh, so well, if we just look around the gallery, and we know, don't we, everybody, that of the five of us, there are four of us who are solar powered, and there tends to be just the one of us who is battery powered. And that's the sort of difference to me between this introversion and extroversion thing. Introversion, people confuse the words. Introverts don't stay in the kitchen at parties, and extroverts aren't the one dancing on the table at parties. It isn't to do with that. It is to do with energy. And yeah, people who have more of a preference for introversion, yeah, we can do it. Absolutely we can do it. And the only thing for me is I find it quite exhausting. And I mean that literally. There are something I just do find it quite tiring. I'm more than happy to do it. Going back to Boo, I think what you were saying, it's the authentic me. This is not me acting, it's the real me. But again, John, when we talk about, professional energy, it's the heightened version of me. And I can do it, and I do it because I want to do it. I believe in what I'm doing. But at the end of it, I'd rather take myself off to the hotel room and stay on my own. And it's far more likely that the four of you want to go out and party.
But it comes, and we've had this discussion before, Jan. But introverts need to be able to learn how to display more extrovert
Yeah,
qualities.
that's the thing. But I would also, banging on about introverts here, the other way round, I think that those who are more extrovert need to recognise that at some stages they just need to shut up and listen. I have a wonderful example years ago being at a meeting which was getting quite heated and there was all sorts going on. And then suddenly somebody said, would you mind if I just made a suggestion? And what this person said changed the whole tone of the meeting. And from then on, it was just wonderful. And I caught up with him afterwards and I said to him, why on earth didn't you say that earlier? If you'd said that earlier, think of the effect it would have had. And he said to me, he said, Jan, you and I know that there were at least three people in that room who needed to listen to themselves first, or they'd listen to anybody else.
That's yeah.
And he was just absolutely picking his moment. And, one of those people that doesn't say anything until he's 100% sure of what he's saying. He doesn't think out loud. He thinks it through and then he delivers. But he was absolutely right. They were in the room needed to hear themselves first before they could.
Yeah. I'm sure I've told a couple of you the story of when my very first job, I was left school and I went to London and I was in the accounts department of an insurance company, believe it or not. And there were four of us who became quite good friends, and we used to go out for lunch and we used to play nomination trumps. Like very different days then, you could have a beer and play. So we played trumps. And of course, I was an extrovert and I was with accountants who were more introvert. So I always thought I was the life and soul of the party, chatting away, da 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 da. And there was a little part of me, terrible, arrogant, but you think, what would happen if I wasn't here? Anyway, that summer, one of the summers, I went off on my 2 week holiday, and I came back and we all went out for lunch. And I said, "Did you go out for lunch the last couple of weeks? When I wasn't here?" They went, "Yeah." I said, "What did you chat about?" Because I'm always the one who's chatting. I said, "We were fine, John. We played trumps. We had nice chats. It was okay." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I thought the world would have collapsed without me being there. But like, actually, it was probably really nice for them. It's probably more of a holiday for them than it was for me. Yeah, good point. I see no one's leaping to my defense here.
So we think it's coachable, and we know it's coachable. That doesn't mean it's coachable to all people all of the time. That is clearly also evident. But I think a key takeaway has to be that yes, application of certain principles can really stand you well, and in many cases will have a dramatic influence. Impact on your ability to speak with charisma, influence, and persuasion. There's no doubt about that.
Definitely. Brilliant. Thanks, Mikey, for leading that. Fascinating. And we've got one more part to come where we are going to discuss who we believe, Boo's going to lead us, who we believe has all of these qualities, who doesn't have these qualities. And again, we'll talk about why all of that matters. See you for part 3.
How are you? So a butterfly in the morning, just one